If you got a Bible, I'd love for you to meet me in Philippians chapter number 2. We will get there in just a moment. As we know, this is Black History Month, and it is a celebration of the contributions of Black people in this country. And I mean, if we really think about it, it is kind of sad that we actually have to have a Black History Month. And the reason that Carter G. Woodson wanted this to happen is he didn't want the contributions and the significant contributions of Black people to be forgotten about. And he wanted them to be highlighted by all of the country, and he didn't want them to be forgotten by Black people. And so during Black History Month, we begin to hear names that we're familiar with. Names like Frederick Douglass, and names like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Jackie Robinson, Harriet Tubman, the list goes on and on. We know these names. But there may be one name that is unfamiliar to you, that you haven't heard, probably because she is white. In March 1965, there's a woman named Viola Liuzzo, white woman, 39 years old, mother of 5, who got in her car and drove from Michigan all the way to Alabama. And she drove to Alabama to be a part of the civil rights movement because she had had enough. She had had enough in her own personal life that she had experienced and didn't like. And then she heard the call from Dr. King to come down to Alabama to participate in a protest. And so she decided that she was going to go. Now, her husband wasn't really feeling this, as you can imagine. She is a white woman, she's white and she's a woman. And so he says to her, Viola, this isn't your fight. And she said to her husband, you're right, it isn't my fight. It is our fight. It is everyone's fight. Viola went on to ask her friend, her dear friend, Sarah Evans, who happened to be Black. She was a restaurant worker, and she says, while I'm gone, I want you to take care of my kids. And it was almost as if Viola knew that she might not make it back. It just so happened a week later, March 25th, 1965, the Ku Klux Klan rode alongside Viola's car and shot her in the head twice, killing her because she had been going back and forth between Montgomery and Selma transporting protesters, Black protesters, and they noticed what she was doing and decided that they were going to take her out. And there was a young Black man in the car with her that day, 19-year-old Leroy Moulton, who experienced this, and with blood all over his body from Viola, he played dead and survived, and he was able to testify against these men that I believe only got like 10 years in prison for this. There are several reasons why this story has captivated me since the first time I heard it. The first one being is that the struggle for justice and preservation of human dignity is just what Viola said. It's everyone's fight. Secondly, a decision to intentionally not help is the same as a decision to allow hurt. But then thirdly, and this is the one that really got me, it was a quote from Viola's daughter, Mary Lilleboe, and she said, Mom actually believed it when Christ said that the suffering and needy are our people. Mom saw all other human beings as her people. What I'm struck by and what stirs my resolve when I hear stories like this, and as we celebrate and we honor people who have had tremendous sacrifice, particularly those who are Black Americans during the month of February, and those who have fought for our shared history, because it is all of our history here in this country. What stirs me is that these things we celebrate are not really successes when we think about the metrics of success. I mean, what Viola set out to do, she failed to accomplish. And what many of those who sacrificed in this movement and who we celebrate this month, they failed as well. You can argue that they all failed based upon how we measure success. Rosa Parks and Dr. King and others, they didn't accomplish fully what they set out to accomplish. But that's not the most significant thing. The most significant thing is that they had a mindset that bypassed comfort, convenience, and conceit. They had a different way of thinking that had nothing to do with what they accomplished individually, but they knew that they had the right mindset, a mindset that reflected what they professed and not just repeated what was proper. You know, we know how to be politically correct, but there are many of us and many things we hear that are politically correct, but it's not necessarily reflected in our actions. This series that we've been in, called Where It All Begins, is about our mind. It's about our mindset that we have. And we've said almost every week that every action is the genesis of a thought. And at some point, what we give attention to must match what we believe. And it is our decisions that ultimately reveal what we have really given ourselves to. Just like Viola's husband probably believed the same thing that she believed or thought the same thing that she believed, but wasn't willing to sacrifice what she was willing to sacrifice. We all know people who say they believe one thing, but the reflection of their life is completely different. I had this mentee of mine who I love, and we spent a lot of time together when he was in high school, and he's out of high school now. He's doing this thing, but we still talking, and I'm still connected with him. But I remember this one time, it was the end of his sophomore year, going into his junior year, and it was that summer. He had said to me, "Hey, listen, I have aspirations of playing football at the next level." I said, "Okay, cool. Let's work on that. I'm gonna be invested in that with you." He said, "Okay." And so I said, "Hey, listen, you need to be working out. You need to be running. These are things you need to be doing." So I happened to call him one day. I said, "Hey, bro, listen, one of my NFL homies that I played with back in the day is getting a bunch of high school guys together, and he's doing these workouts. I think it'll be good for you. I think you go up against some good competition. You can kind of see where you are, and it'll just be a good experience for you." 20 minutes in, he throwing up. Didn't even make it through the workout. And so on the way home, I said, "Bro, listen, you said that this is what you wanted to do." What it revealed was his mindset wasn't where it needed to be. There was a disconnect there in his mind because he wasn't working out. He wasn't prepared for the moment. And so he had a reality check of where he actually was. Some of us are the same way. We say we're going to be wealthy, but our spending habits and our saving habits and how we think about money and how we use money don't reflect wealth at all. There's some of us, and some people we know. Tell your neighbor, like, not you, but you know, somebody we might know in the vicinity. Believe in the existence of God. Believe in Jesus. Sing, show up, know a couple of scriptures, but our mindset is not one of a follower because our actions don't reflect that. As we zoom in on Philippians chapter number 2, as we're closing out this series that I feel a little bit sad about closing because I've enjoyed it so much and I've been feeling it so much. But let me just give you a quick series recap, because all of y'all ain't been rolling with us the whole week, the whole time, and some of y'all missed some stuff, and that's okay. You can go back and you can watch the messages or you can listen to them. But week 1, we kicked it off saying we've got to change our minds. We come into the beginning of the year, we want things to be new, things to be different, but it's a mindset. So we got to change our minds. And the theologian Dallas Willard said, our mere existence is of a mind. That's our existence, is a mind. And a mind is only as good as what it is focused on. And ultimately, what we give our attention to has influence over us. Week 2, Pastor Carl echoed the words of Solomon, who said, whatever a man or woman thinks in his heart, that's who you are. Whatever is ruminating in your mind, that is who you are. Week 3, we echoed the words of the prophet Isaiah 26:3. It says, God will keep us in perfect peace if our mind is stayed on him. So, if we focus on God, the benefit of that is peace. Week 4, we talked about how Jesus said that we should love God with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our mind. He said that is the greatest commandment. Like literally loving God with our mind is part of the greatest commandment. That is how we channel our thoughts and where we focus our thinking and what we allow to focus or influence our thinking. And then last week, my brother, Pastor Dave, came through with a little bit of counseling for us, a little bit of psychotherapy, talked to us about the practices that keep us from being anxious. All of these things, all of these weeks culminate and point to today. And what this guy Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament, is encouraging believers to understand is that we all need to have the same mindset as Jesus. And he wrote this letter. Paul was a writing somebody. I mean, he wrote a bunch. It ain't like, man, this brother was writing. So Paul is writing to another group of believers in a place called Philippi, and he's giving them a word picture. He's helping to paint the picture for them of what it means to have the mindset of Christ. So we're going to read his words. Here we go, starting in verse number 5. He says, in your relationships with one another, this is Philippians 2:5-8, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, basically he's saying he is God, he did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. We're going to come back to that. Rather, he made himself nothing. Tell your neighbor, nothing. By taking the very nature of a servant, being made in the human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself. Somebody say humbled. By becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. Simple subject today, if you're taking notes, a Jesus mindset. That's what this series has been all about, is pointing us towards what it means to have a Jesus mindset. Paul makes it really clear to us and clear to Jesus followers that he's writing to, this picture of the mind of Christ. But before we get to that, I think it's important for us to look at the first 6 words that were written there in verse 5. In your relationships with one another. The reason why these words are important, or at least a couple, let me give you a couple. Number 1, y'all know many of our issues that we face is because we don't act right. Not the person next to you, you. Just don't act right. Like it's our human brokenness. It's stuff we got going on. That's what it is. It's us. It's our stuff that we got going on. The second reason why this is important is because of what Jesus said that Paul is really echoing. Jesus said, listen, people will know that you roll with me by how you love one another. That's the evidence. That's how they're going to know that you doing things a little bit different. And he goes on to say, if you only love the people who love you, if you only bless the people who bless you, if you only cool with the people who cool with you, how is that any different? How is that a different mindset? How is that a reflection of a different kingdom? It's basically the same as what everybody else does. So the proof of a Jesus mindset comes out in how we deal with one another. That's the proof. That's why Paul says in your relationships with one another, have the mindset of Jesus. Because that's the proof. All right? Let's examine this a little bit further. I think the very simple question today is, well, what is the mindset of Christ? What is it? Thank you for asking. Here we go. First of all, point number one, a Jesus mindset is one that doesn't flaunt status. Let me break that down to you. Everything in our world is about status, it's about ranking, it's about one-upping the person next to us, around us, or people we don't even know. Education, type of job, the field you in, do you have a criminal record or not? Like, what platform are you on, or blowing up or growing, or like where you live, what neighborhood, what you drive? Like, all of that is status. Even the clothes you wear, the labels you rocking, all of it is status. And here's the thing. I don't want you to think about anybody else. I want you to think about you right now, right? Because here's the thing. We all get caught up into seeking some form of status because it gives us credibility. It gives us access, and it gives us power. But one of the most mind-blowing things is how Jesus lived his life. Because basically, he has all power and all authority, but he never flaunts it. My friend and brother, Jordan Rice, who one day we'll get an opportunity to hear from him here at Hopeville, but he leads an amazing church in Harlem called Renaissance, and I love listening to Jordan. He's an amazing communicator, and so I listened to a lot of his messages, and he was telling this story recently in one of his messages. He's a brilliant brother. He's a lawyer by trade, and so he said when he was in law school, he really loved this like a Christian law society that he was getting the opportunity to lead. And he felt a lot of pride about it, and he was having conversations with people about Jesus. There's one particular guy he was having a conversation with, and he's gonna try to help influence this guy for Jesus. And so he's asking him, like, hey, what do you think about Jesus? And what do you think about the Bible? And so this guy, he's just all over the place. One day he's atheist, and one day he's agnostic, and one day, he's this, and he's frustrated with the church, and he's frustrated with the Bible, and he doesn't understand it, so he's all over the place. But then he says, there's this one story. There's one story about Jesus that I just don't understand. It's when it says that Jesus washed his disciples' feet. He said, I just don't get that. Like, if he really the Son of God, he ain't got no business washing anybody's feet. He's referencing the story in John 13. And while Jordan thought that he was going to change this guy's mind about Jesus, God was actually changing his mind. And Jordan realized as he walked home after that conversation that he was more concerned about his own status. He was more concerned about what he was accomplishing and his success. And realized that he wasn't really reflective of a Jesus that will wash someone's feet. Paul said in verse number 6, Jesus didn't leverage his status to his advantage. Lord, no, that ain't true of us. We don't have no status and we trying to leverage something. We trying to find out who can get the hookup. We the hookup king and queens. We trying to get the advantage. But Paul said rather he made himself nothing. And you know what's so interesting about this to me? is that Jesus is really showing us how we need to show up in the world. Okay, making yourself nothing, but by and large, that is not the reputation of Jesus' followers. That is not the reputation of Christians. Barna did a study that said 9 out of 12 perceptions of Christians, of Jesus' followers, are negative. The top two, you can probably guess them: judgmental and hypocritical. The only way to be judgmental and hypocritical is to think more highly of yourself than you should. It's the wrong mindset. And here's the thing: we're too busy trying to make ourselves something and producing nothing. We spend all of our time trying to look good, trying to show up good, trying to be something that or present in some way that we're not, and we're producing nothing. And on top of that, it is producing in us stress, anxiety, depression, and a joyless life. The antidote to that: make yourself nothing. Why? Because when you identify with Jesus, you don't have anything to prove. And you can rest in your security, and it don't matter what anybody says or thinks about it. You know what it is? It also says in John 13, this story that this guy was referencing to my friend Jordan. You know what it says? It said that Jesus knew that he was from God, and that God had given him all authority. It said that before he went and washed the disciples' feet. He knew who he was. Hey, I'm from God, and I have all authority. This is why the disciples said, particularly Peter, no. Jesus, you can't do that. That's not proper for you to do. And Jesus said, Peter, if you don't let me do this, it's going to be problems. This is what I came to do. And then Paul goes on to write in his letter to Christians in Rome. He says in Romans 8, we are joint heirs with Christ. That means our identity and our authority is in him. It's the same. It also says that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is in us. Yeah, did y'all hear what I just said? Like, that's serious identity and authority. Like, why would we not be secure? The first thing that a Jesus mindset reflects is one that doesn't flaunt status. The second is one that will assume the role of a servant. There's really only one thing that gets in the way of serving. It's selfishness. How do I feel about doing it? Do I want to do it? Who else doing it? What is it going to cost me? If I help out, like, am I going to be obligated? I don't want people thinking that, how can I do it, like, cleanly, neatly, like, maybe a little bit so I don't get sucked in, What is it? What's in it for me? How do I benefit from getting involved? Y'all know we run through all these scenarios in our mind. But check this out. Jesus, who is the Son of God, he is God in the flesh, inconvenienced himself. He could have just did this thing a whole lot differently, but came down to identify with us. Do y'all realize, like, that's deep love? That's serious love. Listen, to the extent you love is the extent to which you will go for that love. Listen, some of y'all got stories of some things, some extent you have gone to that you thought was love, it wasn't. But we got a point of reference of what that actually means, to actually go the distance, to be all in. That's deep love. Paul said in verse 7, Jesus took on the nature of a servant, meaning he got on our level. Y'all know nothing moves people like getting on their level. Nothing. I read a story this week about Travis Kelce, who's playing in the Super Bowl today. And, like, when you watch Travis Kelce play, like, he just looked like he's a very irritating guy. Like, I just don't like him. But everything you read about him is about how he's honoring and about how he's loving and about how he's unselfish. I read this story about how he bought this guy these shoes that were very exclusive that he wanted to get, and the guy was very, very, very disappointed. And Travis got him the shoes because he called his Nike rep and said, "Hey man, I want this guy to have these shoes." And the guy was like, "Man, I just blown away. I just kind of mentioned it in passing. I didn't even know that he would care." And not only that, this guy has one arm. So he's a handicapped guy. But Travis loves this guy so much that he's telling people around, "Hey, don't treat this guy differently. Like, throw him the ball hard. He can catch it. Like, don't be soft on him." And you know what the guy said? That just shows that he sees me. Like, nothing moves people like when you get on their level. How can we have the mindset of Jesus and not be known for serving? How? When Jesus literally said in Matthew 20:28, "I came to serve and not be served." So if you're following Jesus, you are following a servant. And if you're a disciple of Jesus and you're doing what Jesus did, you have to serve, whether you like it or not. Sorry. Let me just keep moving because y'all got a little uncomfortable for me. Jesus' mindset is one that will not flaunt status. Secondly, will assume a role of a servant. And then here's the last one. One that will accept suffering as a way of life. If I hadn't already lost you, you gone now. Pursuing status and sometimes avoiding serving, that's about discomfort. We don't like that. We want to avoid that at all costs. And I totally understand it. Because nobody wants to sign up for discomfort. Nobody wants to sign up for pain, suffering, inconvenience. Some stuff we'll tolerate, like, "Oh, I don't want to work out, but like I need to be healthy." "Oh, I don't want, that's a little bit inconvenient. We'll tolerate some of that. But deep down, we really don't want it. And we